Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we bring you stories served up on gold platters of ideas. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Does someone want to do the recap, or do you want me to do the recap?
I'd like you to do the recap.
Recap. All right, we started a new story last week, and we had something based on a book you're reading, a beginning scene, and a magic system.
Did we come up with a name?
We have not. Do you have a name?
No.
Okay. So the beginning scene was Reed's, and the character in question was Greta. She was part of like a nomadic tribe who had traveled around. I believe they were kind of setting up kind of for more long-term living in this kind of valley. Is that correct, Reed?
Yeah, in the
There was,
foothills of a mountain range that was heavily forested, but kind of on the edge of a valley from this campsite. She was looking down on this vast grassland that stretched to the far horizon.
There was kind of a smoking mountain in
Yep, a volcano. Yep.
And the scene was interrupted by someone running into the camp. They were a person who had part of a kind of a hunting party. Was it a kid?
Yeah, young man.
And he had come back saying that they had seen other people, that they were coming. Does that kind of summarize it, Reed?
Yeah, and the fact that Greta had been, I said mistakenly, 50 seasons, but what I meant would be more like 50 winters. She had been around and had seen a couple of generations, and she remembers her grandmother having, talked about others, and then they went out and they moved away on their own. But from her, no one that she knows or remembers had ever seen any others. This nomadic group had just followed the food and gathered the berries and the fruit, and they'd hunted the game that was available to them. And
right.
Yeah.
And something based on a book you're reading, I had been reading a book called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. And so my thing was a sort of creature, a sort of dark entity that appears as a beautiful guiding force. And its goal is to kill, steal, and destroy. And so how it typically does that is it comes into a community and offers up technological advancement, basically civilizations building style things, but it also pits people against each other and tries to destroy cohesive groups. And I think we'd made some reference to maybe the way that this world was set up, that these nomadic groups were never really supposed to sort of settle down. They were supposed to continue to move around. It was like part of the ecosystem. And this thing was trying to disrupt all of the ecosystem. So it was basically trying to get them to like set up, like make a town and start building, cutting down trees and making houses. And here's like a way that you can grow grain and stuff like that. Like basically giving them the engines of civilization in order to disrupt what their sort of life cycle and lifestyle was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things it did by fomenting jealousy and then by war between tribes. Because war, I wouldn't call them tribes, war between clans. Because war, is not terribly necessary when the clans are so small and kind of spread apart from each other. But if one kind of sets up somewhere, they start to control specific resources. It starts to become in their best interest to secure more land, and then you have sort of the march of civilization. And then the third one was the magic system, which it was kind of like the dream walking from Wheel of Time. And you would kind of go into another dream world. Is this correct, Seth?
Kind of like walking in our world, but in the dream. And again, I don't know what they call it in Wheel of Time, but the more I thought about it, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, I don't have something based on a book I'm reading, but this is basically the dream.
Yeah, the dream walking in Telethenriad or whatever, however.
Telethenriad, yeah.
And you can use that to view things that are fixed, like mountains and stuff, but things that aren't fixed, like houses and people and animals, will appear to constantly shift and change because they aren't fixed. But I imagine if you had two dreamwalkers, they could meet up in the dream and travel to each other over great distances and talk and then go back, so it's a way of doing long distance communication.
Yeah.
So we kind of set up some of the world building stuff. That's it really. This second episode, I think we could maybe add some more world building stuff depending on your guys' story elements. What did you guys have?
I have hero.
I have wise old man.
And I have reoccurring character. So I think we should hear the hero first.
Okay. Well, Heavy Spear is just the name he was called on the hunt, but it stuck. So everybody calls him Heavy Spear. And he's broad-chested, heavily muscled, and he stands like a head taller than most other guys. And the spears he carries in the hunt are literally heavy, crafted from hardwood, but he has the strength to wield such a tool kind of deftly and with agility and precision. And but he is more than just the muscle of the outfit. He's really clever, and he pays attention to the migration of the herd beasts and how the different he's kind of a master hunter, and he has been as he's grown older, people look to him for leadership.
Right.
And here in our present situation, he's in a society in which, although these are a people without any war-making tradition, when encountering these new strange others, his people naturally kind of look to Heavy Spear for leadership. But they have no warlike tradition. They don't have a frame of reference. They don't have war because they've never encountered other people. They've just been off being fruitful and multiplying, so to speak.
Yeah.
But he is, let's see, I was thinking of like Goliath, and he had, what did he say, is used a couple of times in the Old Testament. He had the shaft of his spear was as a weaver's beam. You had this, like, this guy could, when he threw a spear and it stuck an animal, it had enough heft to like really penetrate, So I can see this guy being kind of a fearsome guy to face, in a warlike situation.
I mean, he has really no warlike skills, though.
Well, except for, he could probably, he
I imagine he's probably decent against predators.
Yeah.
My mind goes to Apocalyptico.
I don't think I ever watched the whole thing. I think I saw just parts of it.
It's kind of, spoiler alert, in the end, they see Columbus and stuff coming ashore or whatever, some of the people.
Cortez.
But it deals with like the like a jungle tribe and like the hunter gatherers, almost like this thing that we have set up, and then like there's other people like moving through as they're being pushed out by something else. And what that something else is the Aztecs empire growing and moving, and what they're doing is they go and they are taking these people, and that's what eventually happens is they capture or kill most of the tribe, and they haul anybody else off to the ziggurat, where they're cutting their guts opening and throwing their bodies down, Aztec
Right,
stuff. Sacrificing, because they gotta appease the sun god and make it rain or something. So we gotta cut out people's organs and throw them down the ziggurat. But anyways, like the eclipse happens, it must have appeased something, and so they technically let them go. But it's like a thing where then they, anyways, the guy escapes, right? One of the guys from the tribe escapes, and he escapes back into the jungle. Of course, being the tribe, they weren't warring other tribes. They were hunter gatherers. But then when he finally crosses the river and gets back into his territory, right? He knows the trails. He knows where their traps are set up for the game. He's wise in the way. And so he wasn't, let's say, a strong warrior like these Aztec warriors were. But it's like, he knew the lay of the land. He knew, how to double back, where the beehives were, where the, how to use the environment, in his escape, because then he escaped and they're chasing after him because they're out to kill him. And that's what most of the movie is that kind of him escaping, and they're chasing after him, and he jumps off the waterfall, so they all have to jump off the waterfall, and then they go through the jungle, and it's just I don't know, it's an intense movie. It's pretty good. Probably not for children. I think it's rated R or something. So disclaimer,
Yeah.
not for young children,
But it speaks
really
of a
good
different
movie.
type of skill that will come in handy should it come to blows, as it were said.
Right, where, in a sense, he wasn't, the big, buff warrior that these Aztecs were, the Mayans or whatever it was.
Right.
But like in his own environment, like he knew how to use the, the poisonous frogs and,
Right.
the paths and the, all the different stuff. Very good. But anyways, that's what came to mind when you were explaining that. So not, as the idea of like, well, if they don't have any idea of war, then how would he be a warrior? Well, it depends on, the environment, and the skills of that could transfer over by using his understanding of the environment, over someone's, let's say, physical prowess.
Absolutely. So is Heavy Spear is he a leader in this clan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your vision of him being the hero? Like, explain to me how you're like, this is how he's going to be the hero.
Well, people look to him for leadership, for one thing, and identifying threat. Is this a good thing that we should buy into, or is there something wrong with this and we have to stand against it?
Okay.
And yeah, I see him as a hero and being able to smell a rat. Does that make sense?
Not super to me. I don't understand how being able to smell a rat. Like, when you look at the specifications for his prowess, right? In my opinion, how we're writing out this clan is that they're incredibly peaceful.
And-
Why would they need to be able to know how to smell a rat? Like, in my opinion, they would be deceived very easily because they're
innocents.
Yeah. So
here's my thought on it. So I know in the last one we set up that there's a thought of this tribe to start settling down, right? This is a place they've camped before. The game is always good. It's in between this valley, right? And so this thought of where this kind of evil thing is starting to get the grips, I think something, and I don't know if we talked about it, I say on air, I think it was behind the scenes, talking about using a lot of the same stereotype of stories.
Yeah.
Where this could be a place where we could explore a different kind of idea, where a lot of times I think we use the hero as, that upstart, someone that comes from the background, someone that, gains prominence, right? I think we use that archetype a lot.
Absolutely, yeah.
Someone that, fell from grace, but then, comes back and redeems himself. Whereas I think this would be a chance to kind of look at someone that they're all naturally looking to as a leader of their people. And as they're trying to, like, he's already there, right? But it's that he's having to look and guide in the right direction, right? He doesn't have to, like, prove himself to be the leader.
Right.
They're already looking at him.
Okay.
And so with the turmoil, you got these other people. He's already standing at that pinnacle. They're like, okay, this is something new. What do we do? We're looking to you. We're looking to, he doesn't have to be that guy that comes in and overthrows, the people that have already led everybody astray, or take out the person that has already obtained power, or, anything like that. But that idea that the hero he's already there. Right. But then him having to then guide or lead in the right direction.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where my thought is on that.
I had a thought going that he was probably had a sidekick, and it was somebody that wasn't generally respected as contributing as much, maybe at a physical, less physical capacity, so to speak. So wasn't looked to as a prime contributor to, the whole cause of, being profitable on the hunt. And so, but I'm thinking of like a character from Watership Down. Hazel is kind of the leader, the hero, the lead rabbit of to try to keep his clan safe. And he's got his buddy Fiver, and everybody kind of dismisses Fiver, but Fiver, I see he kind of knows like when something is wrong, and he alerted Hazel, we've got to get out of here. Bad things are going to happen. And nobody wanted to move. So Hazel brings the group that he would listen to him, and they strike out on their own to find a new home. And then it turns out like big machinery came in and like tore up the whole giant warren that was full of rabbits. And like a lot of them got killed and stuff because they didn't follow Hazel. But anyway, I see this guy maybe having been kind to somebody that had been kind of on the fringe of their society, but he kind of picked him up, and he was under Heavy Spear's protection, so he was tolerated. But he might be one of these like dream walker people, or he might have an insight into things where Heavy Spear is like kind of an innocent and would tend toward gullibility because he is unselfish and expects other people to be unselfish, and that kind of thing. But he may have a sidekick that helps him see beyond, I guess.
Well, I want to be really careful here, because when I talk about gullibility, I'm not trying to turn Heavy Spear into kind of a dull person. That kind of feels like what you're saying. Like Heavy Spear, he's kind of like a big dullard, and he needs someone to like tell him. I want to be really careful. I'm not trying to say that because they would be really, that he wouldn't know how to look for guile. That doesn't make him dull.
Right, exactly. It makes him good. But what to do when confronted with actual guile? That's
the thing. If we look at like the first story of being confronted with actual guile, you have two perfect human beings, Adam and Eve, totally and completely enchanted by the what's it called? By the serpent, right?
Yeah, right.
Adam wasn't dull, and Eve wasn't. They just weren't used to it.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be. I'm not saying we need to write a story of a fall from grace.
Right.
But I want to be really sure that if we are going to sort of represent people accurately, okay, here's the scoop. I'm a big, strong guy, and I tend to sort of take people at face value.
Yeah.
Right? And I tend to not really understand people's intentions. I'm not dull. I don't necessarily need someone to say, hey, Levi, maybe that person is lying to you. What I might need is to be hurt once or twice before I start to learn that life isn't as simple in the valley as it once was. Like,
okay,
innocent, if there's evil in the world, then innocence can't be preserved. We preserve it for as long as possible. I'm sensing a story here where everyone listens to the dark being to a certain degree.
Yep.
And the answer isn't to not listen to the dark being. The answer is, after you've fallen out of grace when listening to the dark being, is do you still strive to live in the light after that? That's the story I'm sensing. You guys can tell me if I'm way off base here, if we need to make something more lighthearted than that. But I kind of
that could work.
I kind of have this vision for, like, you have Greta, this old lady who has all of this information, and she's like the one who maybe is the most stick in the mud, right?
Yeah.
She's the one who still doesn't live in a house, in a hut made of wood. She still lives in a teepee.
Yeah.
She still packs her bags up every morning, and everyone else is kind of relaxing into this thing of, let's stay here, it'll be fine. It'll, believing these lies about life and possessions and property and materialism, right? So she's like the one kind of looking on the outside. And it would be interesting if the whole story was from sort of her perspective.
That could be.
Right? And so you have, I don't know, when you were talking about Heavy Spear, do you know who I was thinking of? And I don't mean to be insulting to you, Reed. I was thinking of the horse from Animal Farm.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking of the horse too. He just gives of his strength.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. It's really funny that you bring that up, because I was thinking of that same analogy.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I reacted so visceral, because the horse from Animal Farm is a little dull. He can't read. He just works hard because that's what he is. He's just a hard worker.
Yeah.
And
I didn't mean to, that's what I thought of after you started questioning me. I didn't mean to paint a picture of somebody that was just a dullard at all. In fact, I meant that he was clever, and people looked up to him because he paid attention to to the migrations, and he would anticipate where they would be and set up traps, and he
Right.
made their hunts successful, not just because he could charge in and like throw a spear through a boar's heart, but he could also anticipate where the the beasts would be based
Yeah.
on his experience and knowledge.
You know what other book I'm thinking of when I think about this community? What other book I'm thinking of is The Giver. Have you read that? Seth, have you read The Giver?
I haven't.
Reed,
I
have
picked
you
it up
read it?
from the library book sale a while back
I know.
now, but
Basically, a synopsis
yeah,
is
no, I did get it.
you should read it. It's really good. Basically, it's like a futuristic community where no one has any emotions and no one has any memories. And it's like the way that they use to pacify civilization. They pacify themselves by taking away all color, taking away all like hormonal sexual attraction, and taking away all emotions or heavy emotions. But they found that it's impossible to maintain a cohesive group that way. So what they have is they have a person called the Giver who has this ability to feel, to take people's memories, and he stays sane basically. And then when they have some difficult situation, they call on him and he gives them counsel. And it's about a boy who is going to become the next Giver. And so it's like his radical break out of this kind of monotonous you could call it innocence, but it's like artificial innocence.
Right.
As this old man begins to give him these memories of like spring days and whitewater rafting and breaking his leg and different things like that, gives him puts his hand on his shoulder and like gives him these memories and his kind of realization that this whole world is messed up, and then his eventual kind of what he decides to do about it.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it kind of, I don't know why, but I'm kind of feeling this as well with this story. Not maybe that this whole situation is a manufactured one, but maybe not that. Maybe it's more of like the Garden of Eden. It's like this is the perfect world, and like they were given certain orders, they were given certain tasks to do, and the idea behind it was that they were to remain nomadic. And then the enemy comes in and tries to wake them up to different ideas about life. And they are innocent, yes, but the temptation is always there,
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm so contrary today. I've been really feeling it for some reason. And that's probably because of who my reoccurring character is, which is the top hat from the Top Hat of Destiny, the creature, the incredible intelligence from a different dimension that at one point in time, or will at one point in time, inhabit a top hat. If you haven't read that episode, go back and read it. Listen to it. It's a great episode. But basically, it's a malicious, terrible creature that wants to, in the Top Hat of Destiny, he wants to basically move all of his minions and all of his servants from the dimension where they live into the world in the Top Hat of Destiny and inhabit beings, computers, people. They just want to take over. And I think what it is that this is where they started. So before they were in the sort of slip space dimension where they are in the Top Hat of Destiny, this is where they were. They were servants of nature. They were, dark forces. They were demons. They were whatever you want to call them. But they basically work in concert to turn aside people from the task that was given to them, to turn them aside and to get them to pursue selfishness. Maybe the more that people fight and experience these negative emotions, it gives birth to these creatures. And so if they can create enough turmoil, then they can create enough of these to take on the world. But that's the reoccurring character. And so by the end of it, they have to be cast out into this slip space for them to take part in the Top Hat of Destiny some point in the future. So that's the reoccurring character. But for sure, I think because of Reed's beginning scene, there are people who are aggressive coming to the village, right?
Well, there's two things. Short within a few weeks after this volcano, a different type of herd beast
Right.
probably made its way across the valley.
Right.
And so they went out hunting it, and then they came back. Not only were there different beasts, there were others, and you talked about this darkness that it's kind of wanted to start taking root in this valley, and it probably had already corrupted these others that they were encountering. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And then I think there's like a crucial moment in this story. I was just kind of imagining it is the kid comes back to the camp and starts talking, and he's saying a heavy spear said that everyone should pack up immediately and make their way to our to our summer glade or whatever they call the next place that they would typically go. But then there's kind of a dissenting voice who's like, but we're set up here.
Yeah.
And this is the personification of this dark entity, and he maybe convinces the people to try and set up fortifications instead of fleeing.
Yeah, that'd be a wrinkle.
And then we move back to Heavy Spear as they're kind of watching them, and they're like, it's okay. We, all the women and the children and the elderly who aren't here have made it away into the forest. And then they kind of come back and they see that, no, they haven't.
Yeah.
And that's like this further kind of rift that starts.
Okay.
As like he, has his wisdom, which has been followed because he is the leader, isn't followed. And then that can cause a wound in his heart. And that can also cause death and destruction and, discordia inside of the clan as a whole. Because the idea is that this is a clan. So they're all kind of related to each other, right?
Yep.
Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Do they?
All right. So before we carry on too much, I'll go ahead and introduce the wise old man so that this can be part of kind of what's going on here.
Yeah.
So the wise old man, I'm going to say he's the, in kind of the way things are looking, I think he's the brother of what was the lady from the opening
Greta?
scene, Reed?
Yeah, Greta.
Greta. I think he's Greta's brother. So kind of making a closer connection there. And he's one of the other people who, again, doesn't, he hasn't made a permanent home.
Yeah.
As other people are settling down. He's one of these dream walkers.
Okay.
If that's what we're calling them. And, even when they're, summering here, wintering there, springing over here, whatever it is, he never, he's always just kind of like moving around the camp, almost an idea of like as they should always be moving, from place to place to place as they kind of follow the migrations and follow the different things. He's always moving from place to place around the camp. So sometimes he might be farther out from the camp. Sometimes he's close to the camp.
Right.
And he, again, is like Greta, maybe, is, of this thing where it's like he's seeing that they're like trying to stay longer in each different area they are, making more permanent homes so that they have, that place that they come back to when they're in their, rotation in this area or stuff like that. And kind of his wise old man and this kind of, I hate to say shamanistic, but shamanistic, idea.
Yeah.
He's very opposed to it. He's looked to for, wisdom in the clan because he's, the position that he holds. But more and more people are, in the way that I see this going, oh, you're outdated. Oh, it's fine for us to settle down now. It's, it's all okay here. Why should we listen to you? This is a good place. Game is always coming through here. But he's one of the voices, I think, that is encouraging the not settling down, moving on, and being the dream walker. He's also then confronting these things, and that's one of the reasons he's always moving around the camp, is because he is, trying as best as he can. However, it's, in his older age and just the intensity of what's going on, it's harder and harder for him because now there's less and less people in tune to this, but he is like more and more overwhelmed as he's like fighting this evil thing on the other side.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So he's
Um,
actually engaging this thing in the dream then?
right. Because I think that's part of what the inspiration for this idea came from was the idea of, interacting with the unseen in the dream side of reality.
Yeah.
Um, although it's like helpful for, communicating with other dream walkers or seeing or scouting out different, areas or seeing
Right.
things as they are
Right.
or as they're perceived to be, in an area. It's the reverse side.
Yeah.
It's the reality behind the curtain, right? It's, the idea that, in our own psychology, when we're awake, is this reality or is our dream a reality? Which one is more real,
Are you asking me or are
right?
you just posing the question? I have no idea.
And I'm posing the question,
Right.
not like I need the answer, but it's like, and I know, like, especially in our modern society where we're inundated with, so much, TV and movies and, interaction with, imagination and visualizing it. But the idea that, our subconscious is seeing and interacting with something that is real but not seen in the waking reality.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of where some of the inspiration of it came from. But which then the more I thought of that, the more it seemed more like the telethon, whatever, the
Telethenriod?
wheel of
Yeah.
telethonriad. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what he does. Now, one of the things is that he has a companion that goes with him. However, his companion recently has passed. And I don't know if these people have, as it would be wolves or dogs, but he had
It would
a
make sense that they would have some kind of guard dog.
guard
There's still
dog
going to
that
be
would always go
predators,
with
I
him.
guess, even if they don't know how to fight humans. I realize that as I brought up that not able to fight. There's still going to be bears and wolves and things.
Yeah. So that is one of the things that he has is for years he had a companion with him, a dog that its name was Blue, and it would go with him and travel. But it's recently passed away, but it still lives with him on the dream side and fights with him. These things, and as they move around the camp, walks with him and fights with him, and almost like a shepherd or like a guard over the thing.
Yeah.
But but anyway, so in his dream walking, his companion that he's had for years is with him again, aiding him in the protection of the village and the things that are unseen.
That's great. I like this idea. I had you were talking and I had this kind of idea that he's always kind of, it's a dream world. So you have to be asleep to be dreaming. So you'd be walking around the camp and you'll just like see him as he's just like laying down by someone's tent, just taking a little power nap. And then he kind of gets up and and kind of stumbles around to a different part and then kind of lays down in the sun. And but really he's like going to these different parts of the camp and like securing them. But to everyone who looks at him, we were just talking about earlier before we were recording, like the wisdom of God is foolishness to man. It's like the wisdom of the dream walker is foolishness to those who can't,
Yeah.
It's like, so to them, he's like this dodly old man who takes naps everywhere without ever the consideration that he's like diving in to like defend them, but it just looks like he's taking a little power nap.
I'm really liking this. Kind of identifying with him. Sorry to say.
No, it's good. I was thinking about you when no.
Yeah, I'm gonna just nod off, and Blue and I are gonna like kick some serious butt here.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of like this situation as we have it, where the boy comes back and he says, "There's people coming. Heavy Spear said to move out, to flee to the hills." And then there's like this voice, this dissenting voice that comes in and kind of speaks in a dissenting way, And this is either the personification of this dark being or is someone who is listening to this dark beings,
I mean, I would say there's other dream walkers, and I think that's where some of it comes into. Where, like, let's say, like a council might come in and be like, all right, let's start packing it up. And it's like, oh no, I have heard from, the dream side, that this is a good place. The fortifications are good. Why do we have to, right?
Right.
So bringing from that place of kind of, spiritual authority, a different voice that isn't what is, what they have always followed, what, that they have followed from their ancestors and has been laid down from generation to generation.
From ages to ages.
Which then rise from ages to ages, which then creates some of the conflict where it's like these people coming and speaking from that, authority that people look to for wisdom or guidance, saying, oh no, we've heard from the dream side, our guides have told us that, we need to do such and such, but it being straying away from what they've always known to be what has been what they should be doing.
Right. But it makes a lot of sense. The argument's very good. That's part of the thing, is that I don't want it to be like it's just a majority vote. It's everyone kind of says, oh yeah, oh, we'll sharpen these sticks and we'll set them sort of pointing out, and then at some point the rest of the hunting party comes back. But I feel like maybe there should be a conflict in between that, like with the others.
Yeah.
There needs to be some conflict between those two. Oh, what if it's like, okay, what if the others are refugees fleeing whatever conflict has happened on the other end of the valley?
Yeah.
Right? Not to make things more complicated, but that means when Heavy Spear comes back with people, A, we don't know.
They don't look like us, is what his first report was.
And B, people that, maybe there's a very beautiful woman.
Well, that usually complicates things.
Yeah, beautiful women. They tend to just muck things up in a good way, or maybe it's people who, it's people we don't know, and then they bring them back, and then there's even more kind of, I see this all coming to a head, and I'm trying to figure out where the resolution is going to be. And I know we have a whole nother episode to do it, but for some reason, I'm like really locked in to the process of this story, and I don't really know why. And so my brain is like really like you have to figure out. I don't know. Part of me is like,
this is where my mind is
real
going.
quick,
My
real
mind
quick.
keeps going back to
real quick. Part of me is like, I want a specific instance of all of them being deceived and turning away in some degree or another, except for this wise old man. And probably Greta, but maybe Greta a little bit. I don't know why I need that, but this feels like Adam and Eve's fall, a story of a civilization who lived in peace and tranquility and then fell from that. This feels like the start of a world. Like this is going to be in the scriptures. This is going to be in the beginning.
Okay.
That's what this feels like in levels of setting up. And so I've been reading a lot about the fall of man in the scriptures, and so I am thinking about it a lot. And so my brain is like, get this right, Levi.
Okay.
So Seth, go.
So my idea kind of goes back to Apocalyptico, and the Amish, kind of, as if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
And the more that the idea that as these new things come in, again in Apocalyptico, you have this, they're living off the land, they know the area, they're kind of at peace with their clan, and all this stuff. And this new, the Aztecs, the civilized, it always like behooves me where, sorry, I'm off on a different tangent now, where they're like, oh, the Mayans, they had running water, and then you're like, yeah, but they also like gathered up their virgins and like gutted them on top of a ziggurat and like
Right. Right.
Like, what does it matter that they had running water? They were sick.
Yeah.
They were sick people, right? And of course there's other arguments to, oh, well, they really didn't do that. Well, who no, they did that. And so did the Aztecs. And so did everybody over there until a ship of Vikings, Christian Vikings, got lost in a storm, and the accounts say that this, magic raft came, and these tall, blonde, bearded men came off the boat and made them stop sacrificing humans. And it was such a novel idea and then they left and said they'd be back, and then they left, and then a couple hundred years later, Cortez came over, and they're like, oh, well, these are those, pale-faced people that said they'd come back, and, we stopped sacrificing people. At least some of the people did. But only because, anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. But anyways, no, like, what mattered that they had running water when they were, gutting people on top of a pyramid and throwing their guts into the, whatever. Anyways, I went off on a tangent.
I mean, that kind of supports my thing where like these dark entities bring like technological advancement, but they trade out strife and conflict,
Right. Okay. So so it gets me back to where I was saying. So like, I've said this for a long time. Like just the way that I see the world going, and I was telling this to my kids today, like when I was a kid, and I know Levi, you and I are about the same age, and I know before we were talking about some of the stuff we were talking about, and Reed had talked about when he first went to college, and all of a sudden when some of this, more, let's say, modern ideas started taking hold, that before that it was just not a thing. But anyways, like the idea that how quickly, society and the quote unquote cultured civilization moves to such a wicked path.
Right.
And then it makes you look at the Amish and go, wow, like they have the right idea, right? To remove themselves from that just mindless pursuit of the newest thing at the greatest speed possible.
Right. Absolutely.
And like I was telling my kids, at least when I was a kid, like if you wanted to get a hold of someone, you wrote them a letter, and I'm in my 30s, so that's not all that long ago, right? To call someone, you'd call them before 8 o'clock, and you had to call them and they'd have to be home, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't call them wherever they were in the world. And just how quickly that has progressed, and all the, I guess, the evils that technology has wrought. And I hate to like diss on technology because it's like a tool. I remember, what is it? It's Olson Scott Card, the Ender. It's not Ender's Game, but it's in that series. There's a guy and they call him the desk, but because he wrote it before we had tablets and phones, but it was kind of prophetic where everyone had their own personal desk, right? And they carried it with them. And it's basically like our cell phones today. And there was one guy in there, and he kept his desk in his garden shed because it was a tool, just like his shovel.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
And because that idea of that technology taking a hold of your life, moving you on to just, as useful as any of these tools are, it's not the tool's fault, right?
Right.
The rock didn't kill Cain, or the rock didn't kill Abel. Cain killed Abel, right? So understanding that. But with this idea of this story that as they settle down, and then it's like setting up this society, and it creates that tension, that progression to needing more than what you already needed.
Yeah, I hear you.
Right. I was playing a game the other day, and it was like you start out, and then you have to like build your houses for your people, blah blah blah, and then as you kind of advance through the different sets of advancements, and it kind of follows a thing where, and it is the way that it goes, right? Oh, you're sitting in this spot, but no one has, they're unhappy because they don't have enough different kinds of food, right? Where at first it's like you just need food, right? You just need enough food. But then like 20, 30 minutes into the game, as you start setting up, well, your people are unhappy because, they need more types of food, or, regular clothes aren't good enough. They need fancy clothes, but you can't get fancy clothes unless you have 3 different kind of weavers and dye factories, and the smelter that you need for that. And it moves on to, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah. Can you
before I get on to too much of a tangent,
can you wrap this all the way back around to the story that we're doing? I agree with everything you're saying. I want to
like the idea that part of the answer is to, as they start settling down here, I would say these others come in and it brings in the tension of, they had been settled down. They got
Right.
uprooted by this
Right.
other clan
Right.
that was expanding their territory. So you get this group of people that comes in and that says, oh, well, this is a good secure location. We can resettle down here and we can give you the advancements that you need to, defend this location. And when they expand, we'll be ready. We just need to, really settle down here. And then you get the idea of some of these people who had accepted the lie, seeing part of the nomadic aspect that these people still have and go, oh, that's right. This was the answer. We weren't supposed to settle down.
Yeah.
Right. So
Oh,
it's a
I'm s-
mixed crowd.
Yeah, I'm seeing like maybe the volcano destroy their homes, and that's what started this. Anyway, or maybe that didn't happen long enough ago to make it work. But
I mean, I'd like to think that, it's another tribe that has settled, kind of like I said at the beginning of this thing with the Apocalyptico, the Aztecs who have settled down and they're growing all their, crops, and they've, set up their way things work, and they have to go, kind of expand out into the jungle. And kind of the answer at the end of Apocalyptico was all these things are changing, and to kind of keep themselves separate or safe from it, they went deeper into the jungle, right? You had all this like change happening over here, and they went deeper into the jungle.
And maybe that will be in some ways part of the answer for this. I think we're going kind of long now, so I think we're gonna cut it off now. I think we've laid a really good foundation for the beginning, the middle of this story, and then the enemy can be lots of different things. These dark creatures, an opposing tribe. We don't ever even have to see anyone else anymore. We don't have to see the others. If there's an enemy, like, we don't even have to see that. I just realized. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. Tune in next week as we come to a resolution on this. It feels like a really important episode to me. I don't know why, but I can't stop thinking about how important it is that we portray this correctly. But come in next week. Let us know. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com if you think we're totally screwing this up, or if you think we're doing a great job. Send Reed an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. Give us a follow, give us a share. Tell your friends, tell your grandma. We'd love to hear from you guys and to hear that you guys are enjoying it. And until next time, just wait, because it gets better.